Hey, what's up, AP World? Video today for you on Reconstruction. You know it will be on your AP test in some way, shape, or form. It's actually been a while since there has been a free response or DBQ on Reconstruction, so you never know, it may appear there. But this video will cover everything you need to know about Reconstruction for your APUSH exam. Okay, let's do a brief intro on what Reconstruction is. And it is attempting to achieve national unification after the Civil War. So it's basically trying to reunite the country and get it back as one. Key questions regarding Reconstruction is who would control Reconstruction? Is this a congressional thing? Is this a presidential thing? And how would the South be treated? Would they be treated nicely? Would they be treated harshly? Somewhere in between? Lots of questions. Hopefully, we'll be able to answer these. Okay, when the Civil War ends, Lincoln dies about a week and a half later, and he has a plan for Reconstruction or how the South should be readmitted. And this plan was considered very favorable to the South. His plan was called the 10% plan. And he said if 10% of voters in the 1860 election, Southern voters, pledged loyalty to the U.S., that state could be readmitted. And that 1860 year is very important because that's the year Lincoln was elected and when the Southern states started to secede. Congress felt it was too lenient, so they kind of had a different idea, and this was seen in the Wade Davis bill. In Congress, specifically the Republicans, sought 50% of the voters in the 1860 election to pledge allegiance instead of Lincoln's 10. And Lincoln actually pocket vetoes this. So the Wade Davis bill never happens, but it demonstrates the difference between presidential and congressional views of the readmission of Southern states. President Johnson, some background on him, his Reconstruction plan was similar to Lincoln, followed a 10% plan as well, and he also reluctantly required states to ratify the 13th Amendment. And Confederates could appeal to him directly for a pardon or to be forgiven for a crime. He was disliked by radical Republicans because he was a Democrat from the South. He was added to Lincoln's ticket in 1864 to kind of get a better balance. And he was impeached for violating the Tenure of Office Act, which was an act specifically set up to get him in trouble. He ended up firing a holdover from Lincoln's administration, Secretary of War Stanton, who supported radical Republican ideas. So he was fired by Johnson. And then because he violated this act, which said that the president cannot fire any cabinet members without their approval, he was impeached. And impeached means charges were brought against you. He was not removed. Johnson fell one vote shy of being removed. And he was tried in the Senate. And Chief Justice Salmon P. Chase here was the judge in his trial. He is from Cincinnati, in case you didn't know. Okay, so we have this term radical reconstruction we've been talking about. Why does this occur? Well, Congress and the Republicans wanted to maintain their power, and there are two key congressmen we're going to focus on. Thaddeus Stevens over here, and if you've seen the movie Lincoln, that is who Tommy Lee Jones played. And Charles Sumner over here, and if you remember, he was one that was beaten by the cane in the 1850s by Preston Brooks. Former Confederate officials ran for federal office. We have this guy, Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Confederate States of America. He became a senator in the U.S., so the North was furious. The radical Republicans were furious, wondering what on earth did they fight the Civil War for. The South also instituted black codes, which regulated affairs of freedmen or former slaves, and conditions were very similar to slavery. So again, what was the war fought for if conditions were going to be very similar? An important part of radical Reconstruction is that the South is divided into 5 different military zones. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Each one would be headed by a Union general, and this lasted for several years, as we will see. Okay, the Freedmen's Bureau, the goal of this was established in 1866, and they wanted to help former slaves survive and adjust to their new life. They also provided food, medicine, and clothing to former slaves and poor whites. Many people were promised 40 acres and a mule, although this rarely happened. But the biggest success, you must know the biggest success of the Freedmen's Bureau, it was not providing food, it was not providing medicine, it was not providing 40 acres and a mule. Rather, it was providing education. Hundreds of thousands of blacks were educated. That's very important because during the Civil War and prior to the Civil War, it was illegal for blacks to learn how to read and write, and their illiteracy rates were as high as 90% for African Americans. So the Freedmen's Bureau helps address that. Know that, guys. Okay, we're going to throw three amendments at you in some key terms. 13th Amendment made slavery illegal. This was pushed by Lincoln. If you've seen the movie Lincoln, that's what the entire movie is about. 14th Amendment comes a little bit later, does a couple things. One, you must know, it granted citizenship to blacks and also provided equal protection for citizens that could not be denied. And the other thing it did was it made it so that former Confederate officers could not hold state or federal office. This was directed at, for example, Alexander Stephens. Any high ranking Confederate official could not hold a state or federal office. The 15th Amendment, which comes a little bit later, granted suffrage for blacks, and the South found loopholes to get around this. Poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, etc. So these are key amendments that you absolutely positively must know, although the 15th Amendment the South found ways to get around. Two other key terms you need to know is the scalawag, and notice that scalawag starts with an S, and they were Southerners, S and S, Southerners that favored Reconstruction. Carpetbaggers were those who lived in the North that moved to the South during Reconstruction for a variety of reasons, some of which wanted to make money. And the Force Acts were passed in 1870 to 1871. These were passed in response to the Ku Klux Klan, which was terrorizing African Americans, and federal troops could be sent in and used to quell the KKK.